Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of the coverage this evening. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Stephen Young is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our Adam Bernstein is out in the field getting ready to track the rocket and do some still photography as well. Of course, if you would like to keep tabs on the launch photography of our two ace rocket trackers here, go ahead and follow them on X. Adam Bernstein is at ABurnNYC, and our Michael Kane is at MD Kane Jr. Again, these are their handles on X for launch photography from these and many other missions in the past, and fortunately, many more yet to come in 2024. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 14 minutes and counting to the launch of the Starlink 6-37 mission. This is set to be SpaceX's fourth flight of the year, fourth with the Falcon 9 as well. We're looking at Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. This will be the 46th dedicated mission launching SpaceX's upgraded Starlink V2 mini satellites. Currently, SpaceX is targeting that T0 liftoff time of its Falcon 9 rocket for 7:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For our viewers joining from around the world, that's 0052 UTC. Our thanks also to our friend Chuck Briggs for helping to provide tracking views tonight, taking a look from his camera this evening. And as always, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our wonderful moderators in the live chat, folks like Dremwolf, for helping to keep things kosher and allowing for constructive conversation, chats about the launch tonight, and whatever other space topics everyone would like to discuss. Of course, certainly appreciate the more than 2,000 of you that are joining us at the start of our live launch coverage this evening. If you would do us a favor, please hit the like button and share the stream. That would be exceedingly helpful and allows more folks to find this coverage tonight. We're also powered by channel membership, so I want to thank all of those wonderful channel members out there who are joining us this evening and those who are newly joining us. Folks like Randall Betts, who's joined at the pad leader level, and we appreciate very much the generosity of our channel members as well in bringing other folks into the Spaceflight Now fold. I want to thank Mark Otto, one of our channel members as well, for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships right off the bat. Really appreciate that, Mark. Good to see you this evening. And to those in the live chat who are now new Spaceflight Now members, welcome aboard. Channel membership includes benefits like access to live 4K views and 4K views of all the launches that happen here at the Cape, both at KSC and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Also access to our member-only videos and discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. We'd also love to have you be a part of the conversation this evening, if you'd like. The YouTube Super Chat feature allows not only for you to support what we do here at Spaceflight Now, which is very much appreciated, but if your comment is appropriate to be read on our show, we'd love to answer your questions or bring you into the conversation about this launch or some of the other space-related activities coming up right around the corner. We're now T-minus 57 minutes, 18 seconds and counting, about 20 minutes away from the point in which the launch director would give their go for the start of propellant mode for tonight's launch. If you haven't been with us for a recent SpaceX flight, I'll just note for housekeeping here, SpaceX not providing mission audio ahead of the final 5 minutes of the count, so we will rely on our extensive experience in covering SpaceX and Falcon 9 missions to guide you through this countdown and some of the visual cues that we are watching for to let you know that things are likely on track. SpaceX is running its countdown from its Hangar X site here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Hangar X is the facility where they refurbish their Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights, as is the case with the one you see live on your screen right now. Again, looking from Chuck Briggs' view. SpaceX also has support for this launch in part from the control room at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. SpaceX looking to launch potentially 2 missions this weekend. They have been running into some weather and wind troubles over in California, so they're going to try yet again in the painfully early hour of 12:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, or a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I should say. That's 3:59 a.m. here on the East Coast, 08:59 UTC for the Starlink 7-10 mission. So look forward to joining you back again for that one. But for now, tonight's launch here at the Cape, targeting liftoff at 7:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 00:52 UTC. SpaceX, if they don't start fueling, has multiple backup opportunities that last until 11:50 p.m. Eastern tonight. And if for whatever reason none of that pans out and they need to pivot to tomorrow, SpaceX has a backup opportunity window that opens at 7:45 p.m. tomorrow night. We're now T-minus 55 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Weather looking fairly decent for tonight's launch attempt. Coming into this evening, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast 70% odds of favorable weather for liftoff during this window. The primary watch item for tonight are the thick clouds hanging around the Cape. If needed for launch tomorrow, the weather forecast looks slightly better. 80% favorable weather odds. Again, the thick cloud layers rule is the only watch item. Upper level winds not presenting an issue tonight, which is certainly good news. We're now T-minus 54 minutes on the dot. Want to thank Greg Fischel's YouTube channel for $2 super chat. Really appreciate that, Greg. Greg asks, any upcoming launches visible in Myrtle Beach? Well, unfortunately, as far as the Starlink constellation is concerned, all of those launches are flying in a southeasterly trajectory. And so our friends up in North Carolina or farther north along the East Coast are going to be out of luck as far as those are concerned. Fortunately, though, you won't have to wait too long between now and the next time you can potentially see, again, assuming a lack of cloud cover from your vantage point, but the next private astronaut mission heading up to the International Space Station, AX-3, chartered by Axiom Space in Houston, that Falcon 9 is going to be flying in a northeasterly trajectory going up and along the East Coast there. So, again, if the clouds cooperate, there's a good chance you may see that quartet of European astronauts heading up to the ISS. That will also be a return to landing site mission, as is the new operating procedure for crewed launches leaving from Launch Complex 39A. So for folks that are in the Central Florida area, heads up, and if you have friends in this neck of the woods, be sure to let them know that there will be a sonic boom on Wednesday evening or following the launch of the AX-3 mission whenever it happens. We're now T-minus 52 minutes, 6 seconds and counting. Before we go ahead and dive into the countdown timeline tonight, I want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. Callistia Lee, one of our wonderful channel members and a regular, joining us again with a good bit of generosity, gifting 20 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Callistia. Thank you so much. And to Gator 55555 for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership as well. Thank you, Gator, one of our other wonderful channel members. Nelson Reyes Another channel member joining us this evening with a $10 super chat. Good to see you this evening, Nelson. Oh, wonderful. Says, I finally pulled the trigger and joined membership. Thank you for the great coverage. And yes, I just realized that you also have a membership badge next to your name. It's really great to see that support, Nelson. I know you're one of our regulars joining us for live launch coverage and helping to support what we do here at Spaceflight Now. So really appreciate the vote of support there with channel membership. Thank you for that. And to Christopher Jones for a $2 super chat as well. Thank you all. Turning to the launch countdown timeline as we are T-minus 50 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. Starts, as mentioned, at the T-minus 38-minute mark, where the launch director will make the call on the start of propellant load. If she or he gives that go-ahead, that'll start at T-minus 35 minutes, with rocket-grade kerosene being loaded onto both the first and the second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. At the same time, liquid oxygen will be loaded on board the first stage. And at T-minus 16 minutes, LOX will start flowing onto the second stage of the Falcon 9. Before that happens, though, we'll get a good visual indication that fueling is, in fact, on track. I like to call it the so-called big vent event. You see that from the strong back. Happens as the feed lines are chilled. T-minus 7 minutes, chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps. It's important because it protects the 9 Merlin engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out from liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin from the Falcon 9 rocket. It'll start with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, strong back will pull in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb with the Falcon 9. About 2 minutes out, liquid oxygen loading should be wrapped up. At that point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Coming into the final minute, the control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director gives their go for liftoff at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And then, of course, if all 9 engines are ignite and are healthy, the flight computer will give the hold down clamps that command to release the Falcon 9 at the T0, again targeting currently 7:52 p.m. Eastern. And just as a reminder, once SpaceX does start the fueling process, that will commit them to that fueling timeline. SpaceX and the Falcon 9 doesn't have the ability, once fueling has begun, to shift to later in the window. So if for whatever reason SpaceX wants to push things back a little bit, they will have to delay the start of fueling. We're now T-minus 48 minutes on the dot. We're now T-minus 45 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. Coming up on 7 minutes away from the point at which the launch director will make their call on the starter propellant load. As we continue to go ahead and step through the count, let's talk a little bit about where this rocket will be heading once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Falcon 9 will lift off from the pad at Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, of course, at currently targeting 7:52 for that departure, Eastern Standard Time. We'll fly in a southeast trajectory towards the Caribbean. And following stage separation, the first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. The one on deck tonight is a short fall of gravitas. The upper stage, of course, will continue on with the Starlink satellites. The fairing halves will jettison just a bit downrange of this map as well. SpaceX will use one of its 2 East Coast recovery vessels to scoop up the fairing halves. And tonight, they're using Doug. Of course, it and the other recovery vessel, Bob, are named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, the duo who famously flew aboard the Demo 2 mission. As we were talking about the payload fairings that are going to be recovered, I want to bring up this slide from the SpaceX company-wide talk that SpaceX founder Elon Musk gave earlier this week that was published to social media. It's talking about the fairing recovery. As we mentioned when we talk about the fairings, they splash down under parachutes. This is a good photo of that illustration of the process. And as noted by SpaceX, they have reflown fairings more than 300 times at this point. Another critical part of SpaceX's plan and platform of increasing the amount of reuse that's possible on its vehicles, both the fairings as well as the first stage boosters. One of the areas where fairing reuse will come into play at some point in the future, we don't know exactly when, and it's still being worked out, is for national security space launch missions, which are important not only for the nation, but also they are high-dollar missions for SpaceX as well. Currently, they only use new fairing halves for each of their missions, but they're looking at the opportunity to start reuse at some point in the near future. So while this photo is a good illustration of how the fairings splash down, let's look at the fairings look like as they're being recovered. As mentioned, SpaceX has 2 East Coast recovery vessels, Bob and Doug. This is what it looks like when they're scooping them out of the ocean. At that point, the fairing half that you see hoisted above the Atlantic Ocean waters was flying for a 13th time. Just a good illustration of how this whole process comes together for a chorus of reuse. We're now T-minus 40 minutes and counting. Less than 2 minutes now away from the point at which the launch director will make their call on the start of propellant load. We're now T-minus 38 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Just a few seconds away from the point at which the launch director will make that call on the start of propellant load. Again, just as a reminder, because SpaceX is not broadcasting mission audio at this point ahead of the final 5 minutes of the count, we won't hear that call out. So we will watch for word from SpaceX that fueling has in fact started. Again, that will happen at T-minus 35 minutes if the go-ahead has been given just now. We should start to see some vapor form and a little bit of a frost ring near the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. Indication that fueling has started, about where that sort of see that lighter color shade of gray near the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. That's about where the frost ring starts to form on the vehicle as liquid oxygen and rocket-grade kerosene are loaded on board the first stage. That RP-1 will also start loading on board the second stage if fueling is set to begin in 2 minutes. I want to thank some folks for their support this evening. First off, a big thank you to the more than 7,200 of you who are joining us live tonight. If you haven't already, great way to help support us. Quick and easy and free, just by hitting the like button. And also, if you haven't subscribed to Spaceflight Now yet, we'd love it if you consider that and turn on notifications as well, so you get the heads up whenever we do these live streams for live launch coverage or for our now weekly News from the Press site show. Comes up every Friday. I also want to thank some folks using the YouTube Super Chat feature. Bob Witter, one of our channel members, with a $3 Super Chat. Thank you so much, Bob. Really appreciate that. The thumbs up pair emoji. And Mitchell Wilbur with a $20 Super Chat. Thank you so much, Mitchell. That's very generous of you. Mitchell says, really appreciate what you do. We appreciate you for helping make this possible, Mitchell. So thank you. And thank you to everyone else who is with us tonight. We're now T-minus 35 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. About 30 seconds out from the point at which propellant load will start if the go-ahead has, in fact, been given by SpaceX launch director. And we do have an update for everyone this evening. SpaceX has adjusted the liftoff time of the Falcon 9 rocket. The new T0 liftoff time is now 8:42 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have adjusted our countdown clocks to reflect that. We're now at T-minus 1 hour, 22 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. As previously mentioned, if SpaceX does not start the fueling process, they are able to adjust the T0 liftoff time as needed. The window for tonight runs until 11:50 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. With a little bit of extra time, want to take a quick look at our live chat here. Did see a question that does come up often. Oh, shoot, where did it go? There we go. Question from Steve Race, which don't blame you for asking. It's something that I'm sure I will ask until the end of time, given my profession. It says, Gene and I would like to know if your name is related to the 60s show, which had a reboot recently on Netflix, was also a movie at one point. Is my name related to Lost in Space? The short answer is no. The slightly longer answer is Robinson is a family name on my mom's side, and Smith comes from my father. So Robinson Smith, entirely unrelated. William, also a family name as well. So just pure happenstance, and I ended up in journalism as a Northwestern grad. And after 10 years in local news, found my way to the Spaceflight Now family, and now firmly on the space beat here with a fabulous group of folks, having no relation or royalties from the show Lost in Space, sadly. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 20 minutes, 41 seconds and counting to that new T0 liftoff time of 8:42 p.m. Eastern. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 15 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. For those who may have just joined us, welcome aboard. I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now. You're watching our live coverage of the Starlink 6-37 mission. SpaceX has adjusted their T0 liftoff time for the mission tonight. This is set to be their 4th Falcon 9 launch of the year. This will also be the 4th launch from the Cape in 2024, including couple of other Falcon 9s, and of course the maiden launch of United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket. Want to bring you a quick update here. We are bringing down our countdown clock as we are hearing that the Starlink 6-37 mission tonight is likely scrubbed. However, we will go ahead and stay on live with everyone until we get official word that the mission has in fact scrubbed from SpaceX. But again, the reason that we are taking our countdown clock down at this time is we are getting word that it is scrubbed for this evening, but again, we will continue to stay alive with you until that becomes 100% official. In the meantime, do want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. Really appreciate you keeping Spaceflight Now going as we do. Don Pierce with a $2 super chat, and Steve Ross with a $2 super chat as well. Thank you to you both. Keith Martin joining us with the channel membership at the mission specialist level. Really appreciate that, Keith. Thank you so much. And Callistia Lee for a $10 super chat. Callistia says, broadcast news loss is our gain. Thanks for the excellent coverage and information, Will. As we continue to wait official word on the scrub of tonight's mission, want to go ahead and bring you some celestial views from around our solar system neighborhood. You're taking a look at the planet Jupiter, courtesy of our friend Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. It's a little hard to see, but if you look just to the left and to the right of Jupiter, you see a few dots as Pete brings it back into focus. I know it's a little tricky with this shot. To the bottom right, in that lower right quadrant, just to the side of Jupiter, that is the moon Io. And to the left, there are two small dots sort of near the equator or thereabouts of Jupiter. The higher dot is Europa. Of course, NASA is preparing to send the Europa Clipper mission on its way to explore that moon. That's set to launch aboard a Falcon 9 a Falcon Heavy rocket from Historic Launch Complex 39A. That mission launching again this October. And just beneath that is the moon Ganymede. So appreciate our friend Pete Carstens for bringing us some celestial views tonight. Those just joining us this evening, just want to go ahead and put a pin in where we are at the moment. It is 7:36 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here at the Cape. Taking a look at the planet Jupiter from our friend Pete Carstens. And the reason you're not seeing a countdown clock is because at this point in time we are hearing that the mission is likely scrubbed. But as previously stated, we will stay live with you until we get official word from SpaceX of that. Do want to thank before we get to thanking folks for their support, we do have word from Brevard County's We're hearing from Brevard's Emergency Operations Center that tonight's launch is officially scrubbed. So again, just as a recap, we now have word from the Brevard County Emergency Management Office that they have deactivated. They are one of the busiest EOCs in the country because they need to activate every time there is a fueling attempt, a static fire, or the majority of activity out at the Eastern Range. Brevard EOC folks hard at work making sure that folks in the surrounding area are safe from any potential mishap that could conceivably happen. And so the fact that they have deactivated their launch operations is an important indication and support that the scrub has happened tonight, and they do say as much as well. So in addition to watching for the next time that SpaceX will attempt to launch the Starlink 6-37 mission, which, according to SpaceX, their next available opportunity from a range standpoint would be tomorrow, Sunday, January 14th. According to SpaceX, their first crack at launching would be 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll wait to hear from SpaceX if they are, in fact, going to seize on that opportunity tomorrow. In the meantime, SpaceX is still very busy here on the East Coast. Taking a look now, the box on the left-hand side, that is Historic Launch Complex 39A, where the 4 astronauts of the AX-3 mission, supported by Axiom Space, will head up to the International Space Station. The launch itself is targeting a liftoff Wednesday evening at 5:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 22:11 UTC. That activity begins, we're expecting tomorrow, with the rollout of the Falcon 9 rocket. That'll head up to the pad. It'll be brought into its upright position. You see the crew access arm lights are on this evening. once the Falcon 9 is at the pad on Monday, the crew will go through what's called a dry dress rehearsal, basically stepping through all of the procedures that they will on the day of launch, including getting suited up, driving out to the pad, getting situated in the Crew Dragon spacecraft, and basically running through all of those steps, simulating the launch procedures that will take place on Wednesday evening. That'll be followed by SpaceX performing a static fire test of the Falcon 9 rocket. Then on Tuesday, they will have their launch readiness review. That's where officials with SpaceX, Axiom Space, and NASA will go over basically everything tip to tail, from the launch procedure to the health of the Falcon 9, as well as the Dragon, the crew readiness, all of that, which will be followed up by a teleconference with the press, which of course we will cover for you. Getting a look at the countdown clock. That is the 4 astronauts, the all-European group that is getting ready to head to the ISS, led by former NASA astronaut Michael Lopez Alegria, who has flown 3 shuttle missions, as well as flying on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. This will be his second time in a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, and his second time as the commander of one of these private astronaut missions. He and fellow former NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson are sharing the responsibilities of commanding these private astronaut missions to the station currently, although during a crew press conference this past week, he did note that at some point they will bring aboard a new commander, but he is ready and willing to raise his hand, as he told our friend Bill Harwood at CBS News, to step up every time he is called upon to lead one of these missions, and is more than happy to do so. So we'll see him head back up for a 14-day stay aboard station. Again, that launch targeting a liftoff from this pad you see here, Launch Complex 39A, at 5:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday, January 17th. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up our live launch coverage this evening, as there will not be a launch tonight, sadly. Do want to thank one of our newest channel members, though, David Sandifer, for joining us at the pad leader level. Really appreciate it. And to David and all of our channel members, first off, thank you. And we do have word from SpaceX now that they are targeting, the plan is to target Sunday, January 14th for that launch of the rocket you see here on your screen for the Starlink 6-37 mission. And a bit of an update to the liftoff timeline. They say they are actually now targeting 7:27 p.m. Eastern Time, with backup opportunities lasting until 11:25 p.m. Of course, that 7:27 p.m. Eastern Standard Time targeted liftoff is the current plan as of now. In the adjustment update from SpaceX as far as the launch of this mission, they did not state a reason as to why the launch was scrubbed tonight. We did have fairly good weather coming into tonight's launch attempt at 70% favorable. So we will keep tabs on SpaceX's launch readiness ahead of tomorrow's planned launch of the Starlink 6-37 mission. I'm getting ahead of myself. SpaceX does have one other launch that they are tracking towards overnight tonight from California at Vandenberg Space Force Base. That is the launch of the Starlink 7-10 mission, which has been facing a number of weather-related headwinds, pardon the pun, to launch that mission, looking to lift off in the early morning hours for most everyone here in the United States. 12:59 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. from the West Coast. That's 3:59 a.m. Eastern and 8:59 UTC for our friends around the world. So, of course, we'll continue to track both of those operations from the West Coast and the East Coast, as well as progress towards the first astronaut mission set to launch from anywhere around the world this year. That is the private astronaut mission of the AX-3 astronauts. With that, we'll go ahead and close things out tonight. Really want to thank everyone for being with us this evening, and of course, we look forward to having you back for our next live launch coverage. Want to thank all of the moderators in the live chat for helping to keep things shipshape and moving along in a copacetic way. To our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions and Chuck Briggs for being on standby and being ready and willing to help us out with tracking coverage tonight. Of course, our wonderful photographers who are always have their cameras pointed high and ready to support with some great rocket photography are Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane. Again, if you're not following them on X, these are their handles. Highly encourage you to do so. They're both excellent at their craft. And our thanks, as always, to Stephen Young, our editor here at Spaceflight Now, who is also running the technical aspects of the broadcast. I'm Will Robinson Smith for Spaceflight Now. For all of us here, be good to yourself, be good to others, and we will see you next time. Good night.